Aotearoa, welcome whānau to the War on News, your weekly Sacred Council of Living Assault and Current Affairs beam live from the palatial Stratus News bunker buried deep beneath the heart of the Greyland Republic. If this show was the mainstream media jerking off over the KFC Double Down Burger while pretending the hype was all social media driven, Colonel Sanders would be presented like this. In tonight's political media crimes against reason kill zone, appointing Kiwi blog as the New Zealand Herald's weekly political columnist is like appointing Paul Henry as chairman of the Broadcasting Standards Authority. It's not David Letterman's top 10 list, John. It's the BB-bloody-C. Prime Minister caught out over New Zealand's 100% greenwash. If New Zealand is in Afghanistan because 7 New Zealanders died from terrorism over a decade, why aren't we bombing KFC Double Down Burgers? Plus this week's Sex in the Super City, Wanko of the Week, and the Barack Obama People's Hero of the Week Award. Leading the War on News this week, brothers and sisters, the Māori Party have claimed that awful Titiwhai Harawira was angry with them when they went onto her marae and labelled it as psychological abuse. Dear Māori Party, that wasn't psychological abuse, that was righteous anger. Who in Māoridom wouldn't be angry over the disgusting way the Māori Party rolled over on the foreshore and seabed land confiscation issue that birthed them? Who wouldn't be scornful of the Māori Party leadership for the dead rats they've managed to beg from John Key's plate? National have used the relationship to camouflage themselves as moderates, a pretense seen through when you consider this government have rammed through more legislation under a misuse of urgency than any other parliament since Roger Douglas passed his love sonnets to Milton Friedman into legislation. The Māori Party's final claim that they could work with Don Brash is the last joke for a party rapidly becoming the punchline. Brash wants to disband the Māori electorates. The Māori Party realise he's talking about their electorates, right? The Māori Party working with Brash is like saying the Green Party could work with Japanese whalers. Brothers and sisters, the government told us this week that we have to cut KiwiSaver because we can't afford it. Right, so while we can't borrow to prop up the appalling saving records of New Zealanders, we can borrow $120 million per week for the tax cuts National has passed. Can't borrow for public good, but can borrow for private benefit. Whānau, is this because the majority of Parliament is made up of rich people who all fall into the top tax bracket? The problem is not public debt. Key keeps saying we need to slash public services and privatise because our debt will destroy us. This isn't true. Cullen did what any government needs to do during the boom times. He paid our government debt down. Key claims we need to privatise our assets to avoid a Standard & Poor's credit downgrade because our debt is so high. New Zealand only spent 1.22% of GDP on debt servicing in 2010. It's not government debt, it's the private debt, the student loans, the credit card hyper-consumer culture, the property speculation all fueled on cheap credit that is to blame, not government investment into society. Key claims to use the privatisation of our assets to pay down our debt. But we're currently borrowing $1 billion per month. He hopes to get $10 billion from these sales. That's 10 months worth of borrowing he will get, whānau. I've heard of short-term solutions, but privatising our assets for less than a year's benefit is a smile and wave too far. If AMI, the manufactured crisis at the Hobbit, and Mr Magoo at South Canterbury Finance were all too big to fail, what is KiwiSaver and our attempt to save for our own retirement? Too small to bother? Remember, whānau, as far as John Key is going and slashing KiwiSaver, how much further will he go with Brash as finance minister? Monty Burns wouldn't just dump KiwiSaver, he'd dump retirement altogether. You can stop working when you die. A vote for John is a vote for Don. Brothers and sisters, Paula Bennett announced $55 million over 4 years to tackle the massive youth unemployment rate they've created because of their mismanagement of the economy. 55 million sounds like a lot of money until you realise that almost half of it will be spent on 6-week boot camps run by the military. What's up with Paula wanting to spend almost half of her measly amount to combat youth unemployment by training them up for combat? Newsflash to Paula Bennett, you can't reduce youth unemployment figures by sending unemployed youth to fight in Afghanistan. To the headlines, whānau. Appointing Appointing Kiwi blog as the New Zealand Herald's weekly political columnist is like appointing Paul Henry as chairman of the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Dear New Zealand Herald, hi, how you doing? Now, I know in the past I've been a bit of a bitch about the New Zealand Herald. I've teased you about your conservative bias, bullshit journalism, and the impression that Stephen Joyce sub-edits the entire newspaper for a very, very, very long time now. But being the largest daily newspaper in this country, you are all we have. You've been gracious enough in the past to print some of my letters, and what you do sets the journalistic benchmark for the rest of the country. So I sincerely hope you listen to what I have to say, consider it, and get back to us. I'd like to question the appointment of the far-right masquerading as right-light blogger, David Farrar, as your weekly columnist on politics. David Farrar is the unofficial mouthpiece of the National Party online and is a pollster for the bloody government. Farrar has nothing more to add than massaged message points his focus group tested on the National Party Research Unit. That you want people with opinions is fantastic, and I applaud the widening of the political debate to include bloggers who are increasingly making their influence felt. But to hand a column over to the government's #1 propagandist without any balance whatsoever is just not acceptable from the largest daily newspaper in the country. I don't question your right to pick whom you like. That is a right any free press has. But the utter imbalance by selecting the government's #1 propagandist to review the political week leaps outside any boundaries of balance. May I humbly suggest that you at the very least put a left-wing blogger alongside David's weekly comments so that there is balance, because allowing the current situation to stand, allowing the #1 propagandist for the government to write a weekly column without any counter-opinion is more Fox News than New Zealand Herald. Moving on with the headlines, whānau. It's not David Letterman's top 10 list, John. It's the BBC. Prime Minister caught out over New Zealand's 100% greenwash. John Key's embarrassing performance on BBC's Hard Talk is a shocker. Our greenwash was always going to be hard to hide when scrutinised, but for Key to challenge one of our leading environmental academics over species decline is a pathetic defence made more uncomfortable because he's the bloody tourism minister. For the love of God, why did Key's handlers let him do Hard Talk? It's not David Letterman, and while the smile and wave routine worked for our easily led domestic media, he was always going to get crucified by a journalist as good as Stephen Sackur. What were the PR team thinking? Keep John Key on close-up for the easily impressed Shirevolk, not the BBC. Our ever-medicatedly optimistic tourism minister had decided earlier this year to avoid the 100% pure brand that New Zealand has spent 12 years and hundreds of millions in building, to degrade our brand down to 100% you. Why have we destroyed our brand right when New Zealand has a clean and green brand that is much more attractive globally at a time pollution is destroying and will increasingly destroy much of the planet? We have done it to hide the fact that New Zealand is increasingly becoming less green and much more polluting. So rather than demand stricter pollution control from our agricultural industry, we just downgraded our brand to accommodate for our economic hypocrisy. If Labour rolled over and took it for the dairy industry, you know National are choosing to sleep in the wet spot. The political party of farmers and bankers will not damage their voting rump by demanding restrictions on farmers using and polluting our water, as has readily been seen by the unbelievable handing over of even more water to the farming lobby under the guise of environmental protection this week. When our very own former Federated Farmers President Charlie Pedersen describes the environmental movement as a war against humanity, why don't we just be honest about our tourism brand and call it 100% pure cow shit? Moving on with the headlines, whānau. If New Zealand is in Afghanistan because 7 New Zealanders died from terrorism over a decade, why aren't we bombing KFC Double Down Burgers? Last month on TVNZ's Q&A, the Defence Minister, Wayne Mapp, justified New Zealand's continued occupation of Afghanistan by claiming 7 New Zealanders had died in a decade because of terrorism. Let's get this straight. We are in Afghanistan because less than one New Zealand citizen has died per year for a decade. That's our threshold to invade and occupy another country. Why aren't we bombing KFC for their new double down burgers then? If less than one New Zealand citizen dying over 10 years is justification to prop up a corrupt regime that has rigged 2 past elections, then the loss of nearly 1 million New Zealanders over a decade due to heart disease should justify the public execution of Colonel Sanders as a war criminal. The revelations exposed in this month's Metro magazine about what our SAS have been really doing in Afghanistan, however, is no laughing matter. Despite John Key attempting to bully a journalist with the reputation of John Stevenson by claiming John was lying about details investigated within the article, is just outrageous. John has countered that the Defence Ministry is merely playing semantics by redefining the detention of prisoners as in the vicinity of SAS. I challenge any New Zealander to read the article and not conclude that we are in fact on an ongoing basis handing civilians over to be tortured by known torture units, and that the incoming Governor-General misled Parliament about the legal loophole he had found to escape the Geneva Convention and international law. Justifying this farce because less than one citizen has died in a decade because of terrorism is bewildering. Thank the little baby Jesus that Metro magazine has become relevant again. Whānau, you feeling sexy? It's Sex in the Super City time. Other cities and regions around New Zealand understand they need to put on events to attract people. We don't bother with events in the Super City because people come here anyway. The only difference between Auckland and a pot of yogurt is that a pot of yogurt has an active culture. The Auckland Super City has earmarked $18 million to attract more events to Auckland. May I suggest $1 million savings and have Len Brown stand on the edge of the Sky Tower and throw $17 million over the edge. That would attract shitloads of people to Auckland. Thankfully, the Super City has recognised that Auckland needs a hero parade. We can't pretend to be a cosmopolitan city if there's no gays and lesbians frolicking up and down the main drag, so to speak. Cities that welcome and celebrate the gay and lesbian community create a hothouse of creative energies that in themselves become an economic driver. Let's embrace Len's vision and bring Auckland out of the closet. Whānau, let's hand out this week's Wanker of the Week award. Brothers and sisters, this week's Wanko of the Week has to go to the blatant misquoting of Hone Harawira by the New Zealand media to suggest Hone supported Osama bin Laden. What Hone actually said was, they, bin Laden's family, mourn for a man who fought for the rights, the land and the freedom of his people. Hone was referring to how bin Laden's family view him. He wasn't suggesting he supported bin Laden. Misinterpreting his respect for the dead as support for the death of 3,000 people is as stupid as calling for a war on terrorism in the first place. Stuff.co.nz first claimed on their site that Hone celebrates Osama bin Laden's life, yet once the actual translation came out, Stuff.co.nz very quietly edited that down to Hone celebrates life. You know the corporate media and their corporate backers are getting nervous about the political representation of the angry poor when they stoop to gutter tactics like purposely misquoting someone to suggest they support terrorism. New Zealanders were easily led by the manufactured crisis of the Hobbit promoted by Russell Brown and the corporate media. Let's not get misled once again by the same clowns. Let's end the show by handing out this week's Barack Obama People's Hero of the Week award. This week's Barack Obama People's Hero of the Week award has to go to a Jewish Hasidic newspaper that deleted the image of Hillary Clinton viewing the state-sanctioned assassination of Osama bin Laden. Here is the original image with Hillary hand on mouth at the shooting, and here is the Hasidic newspaper's version with her edited out. The reason? Because the newspaper felt that the image of Hillary could be considered sexually suggestive, which, when you think about it, is almost as insanely misogynistic as the crazy sexist beliefs Osama himself indulged in. That's it for tonight, folks. Don't forget Citizen A plays Friday, 7:30 p.m. Freeview and Sky 89. Follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter account and Citizen Bomber Facebook site. It has all the shows posted up online and allows you to befriend other like-minded citizens for romantic news moments. Good night, New Zealand. You stay classy, Aotearoa. Righto.